But with that, I'm just going to let Ron will be our first presenter. And so he'll share his screen and he'll go for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then after that, we'll have Mindy. And then after that, we'll have Richard. And then feel free to put questions as you think of them in the comments. We'll have a Q&A period. And then we'll also at the end, if anyone wants to share anything, we'll open it up to the group. But yeah, so go ahead, Ron.
Very good. My name is Ron Pratt. I live in Chandler, Arizona. I'm a retired Elders Quorum president and having a lot of fun. My personal project is putting everybody in Yorkshire, England into the tree from the 1911 census. It's very slow going, but it's also entertaining as can be. What I want to tell you about tonight is I gave just 2 minutes of advice to the Dobson High School seminary teacher one day, and that resulted in 32 million names being indexed in reverse indexing over the course of 2 academic years. This group called themselves the Lord's Battalion, and they were shut out of the temple, so they needed something to do to gather Israel. I suggested reverse indexing, and they jumped into it. So here's some details. Dobson High is in the southwest part of Mesa. The student demographics are shrinking these days in that part of town, and so there's only 3 seminary classes there, about 50 kids. They used mostly, Joe, the phone app instead of the desktop app that's 3 rows of 4. They used the phone that's just 1 column of 12 names for the reverse indexing published by the Record Linking Lab. Their teacher was Jason Mao. He's a Gulf War veteran, a retired policeman, an author, a featured speaker at forums around the country. And he was just doing that as a part-time gig just for something to do because he was also retired. And there's him in front of one of his classes. And this is what he reported to me. These are his words. The kids wanted to follow the prophet's call to enlist in the Lord's Youth Battalion and help gather Israel. They couldn't go to the temple, so doing names, he said, was the next best thing. When he asked me what he should do, because I'd been advising him for a couple of years, so when I had a stake calling, I suggested reverse indexing, and they went with it. I gave him, this is the front page of a 2-sided thing that I gave him about the promises from the brethren of doing temple and family history work. I also gave him a prior version of this that he stuck next to the light switch of the entrance of his seminary classroom. So the kids could go in there and just get a QR code and choose anything they wanted and play with it. That little yellow section has some of the toys that Joe's team created, and the reverse indexing is the top one of those. Where I spend my time in Yorkshire, England, online is the GeoHints one, just having a ball doing that. The student leaders of the classes took charge every day. They would start keeping track of what they did, and they could do a lot of names in one day, just going down that phone tool. So they started keeping track of how many they were doing. And then because of high school peer pressure, they would all feel obligated to do a lot of work, and they would come in and apologize if they had only done 500 the day before. They started bringing on members. They came to an open lunch period where they would do their indexing and eat lunch and goof off, and it was a good place away from the pressures of Dobson High School. One day, they decided to index during the entire class time in one of their class periods, but the internet wasn't working, so they prayed. The internet started working, and they hustled all class period, and then at the end of the class period, the internet died again. Miracles included softened hearts, stronger testimonies, conversions, and some of the hesitant part-timers, you know the type, becoming class leaders. And they did more than reverse indexing. They did all the normal family search things like sources and memories. Some of them jumped into the place name corrections thing where you do that list of 10 at a time. And then when the temples opened up, they started taking class trips to the temple. Every time they did something else in family search, they took it as a one extra name so that they could add it to the totals that they were doing. This is significant. The one student at the end of, I can't remember which year this was. I think it was the first year, who did the most, got to hit Brother Mao in the face with a pie. And that's the result. Hope it was good. This is the scorecard on 2 of the whiteboards in the seminary room at the end of the second academic year that ended in May of this year. And they tracked it, and I'm going to give you some zoom in details of this thing as they tracked all of their progress. So this started in August of 2021. They had a section for what they had done the year before, 6.2 million, and that was announced during their seminary graduation that year. On this same 2 whiteboard thing they used to track their progress, they had 25.7 million the second academic year for a grand total of just shy of 32 million names. So some milestones. They hit 1 million on September 2nd of 2021 in the second year's counting. And they had little prizes for themselves. This one says that Lance would bring cake for everybody. Brother Mao brought donuts when they hit 2 million names 5 days later. Jordan brought ice cream for 3 million names. There's 2 little girls in there that are somewhat special needs. And they drew cartoons all over this thing, and that's their little cupcake, or I don't know what that is. Brownies at 5 million names. Breakfast burritos at 8 million names. More donuts at 10 million names. Homemade fudge brownies for 12 million, and just keeps going. 15 million names must have been around Christmas time, because that little doggy looking thing there has a candy cane with it. And then at 25 million names, one of the Gibson twins wrote, "Lots of people are thankful for what you're doing." And they drew that little unicorn thing there. On a certain day, they did the most they had ever done in one single day, just over 1 million names. So they wrote that down. Now, Joe, this is entirely coincidental, but your name is on the door of that tow truck. They kept the track of the number of times they crashed your servers, and wrote the dates in there up until January. Then they just stopped writing them. The whole thing pointed to the temple. This is another look at that entire whiteboard. It ends there just above those totals on the right side, with 25 million something that day. This is the first academic year's, these are a couple of the classes, the student leaders. This is the group that started the project. They decided on it, this is what we're going to do, and then they're standing in front of the column charts as they kept track of it that year. Ethan Ormiston is in the right-hand side there in a red hoodie with a mask on. He did 700,000 names over 2 years. He happens to be in my ward. Josh Miller did 11 million names in 2 years. He's in the left red hoodie there. And in fact, he's in my ward too. Some of these kids in this picture are on missions now. So it's all thanks to Brother Mao and his leadership and those student leaders who organized it and pushed each other. 32 million names, while they did everything else that high schoolers do with school and sports and music and their jobs and their church callings. When the baptistries opened up, they started going in groups and with their families. And then according to what I've studied, I think this is correct, every missionary from our stake in the last 2 years, including the elder that just flew to Brazil just the other day, were students in those classes. And that's what I have to share, Brother Price.
Thanks, Ron. That was fantastic. I love seeing that whiteboard. So I'm sure I'll have some questions about that later on. So our next presenter, but Ron, thanks, that was fantastic. Our next presenter will be Mindy Ricks from Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so Mindy, let me make you a co-host really quick so that you can share your screen and you should be all set. Yeah, go ahead and share your screen and go right ahead.
Thank you. As it's coming up, I'll just introduce myself really quickly. I'm Mindy. I've been a temple and family history consultant for the past 3.5 years or so. And previous to that, my husband worked in the record leaking lab for Joe. So we really love the work that they do there. It's saying that my sharing is paused. I'm going to stop that. Let's see. Does anyone know how to troubleshoot if it's paused?
It's paused. Let's see. You know what we can do? Mindy, why don't we do this? What if we jump to Richard?
Okay.
And then you can play around with it a little bit, and we'll get you right back on again in just a second.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Mike can help out. He's probably like a Zoom
he's
pro. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll have Richard Miller go next, who's the founder of Goldie May.
Yeah, if you need to test your screen, break in and feel free to share, Mindy. Okay, hey, yeah, so Richard Miller with Goldie May. Can I ask, just as I'm getting started to know what to present, how many of you have used Goldie May volunteering before? Maybe you could just type into the chat, yes, or hands up, or say, no, I haven't used it before, because I'll present it a little bit as well, if I get any no's. Getting yeses so far. Okay, got a no there. Okay, good. So there's a couple of people that I can show it to. Okay, great. Here's my screen if you're seeing that. Okay, I have Family Search open here. And if you go to goldiemay.com and hit the gold button, install Goldie May for free, then there's a blue button on the following page when this loads that'll say add to Chrome. So I'm in the Chrome browser. Mine says remove because I have it added already. But then you'll look for a black letter G up in the top right corner like this. And if you don't see it, it will be under the jigsaw puzzle icon. You can pin it to the menu bar. So when you open that and sign in with Family Search, you'll see these tools, and Goldie May is intended to help you with your research. The one relevant tonight is volunteering. And so I want to show you that. The idea here is that we receive data from Joe Price and the BYU Record Linking Lab for census data that is hinted to the Family Search tree. So the records here could be attached to the tree if someone will look at them and see if they're a good match. And so that's the volunteering work that you can do. So you can come down here and choose a place and a surname. Hutt is a surname in my family. You can choose if you want to work on the 1910 census only, or if you leave that unchecked, it will work on 10, 20, 30, 40, and some other kind of random records in there. But you'll hit start and it will load a record into the source linker. And so what you're seeing on the left is a 1930 census record. And on the right, you're seeing the Family Search tree. And the hint is saying these two records, the record looks like it matches that part of the tree. And so your job is to say, yeah, let's see if these look like a match or not. So you might open up these boxes and say, okay, I've got a Will Hutt and living in Warren County, Ohio, and that matches what's in the tree. And in fact, there are, lots of records before and after the 1930 census. And, as I go down, the wife lines up pretty well too. Why would that name Kuna be different from Cora? Well, maybe that was a transcription error in the census. So you would go through that exercise of seeing if this is a good fit, and then you could add that record to the tree. So you'd click attach and then click compare and add and attach. And then it says, okay, cool, congrats, you're done. You've attached that record to the tree. You can hit next to go to the next one. And so, and let me just, I'm going to let some of these harder ones go by, or it'll skip the ones that are done. So let's look at this one here, and let me skip one ahead still.
If I didn't already know how to do this, I wouldn't have the faintest idea what he's talking about.
Let me go ahead to a couple records here ahead. Okay, so let's look at this one. Right, Catherine and John line up really well. This is a mother and son, and the records look like they line up really well. So if you haven't done this before, one of the big helps, hopefully, of Goldie May is you can click this gold attach records button, and then my hand is off the mouse now, and it's going to go ahead and click the buttons for me to attach that record. And so that allows you to go more quickly through this process of attaching records to the tree. And you can use this with not just the data that comes from inside Goldie May, but if you are using any of the Record Linking Lab spreadsheets or the Record Linking Map app, or even your own genealogy, your own family, then you can also use the Goldie May volunteering tab to work on those families. So say you go to your own family search campaign hints. This is where you see hints that they're telling you are available in your own family. If you go into one of these and pull up the source linker, you have to kind of go to the record, and then you go down to here to attach to family. Then this is someone from my family that, and Goldie May tells me it's my third cousin, 3 times removed. I can go through and say, does this look a good match? And if so, I'll hit attach records. And now I'm using the Goldie May volunteering for records from my own family. And it doesn't have to be census, right? This is a Texas death record. So whatever you want to pull up in the source linker, you can use the Goldie May volunteering tool to attach it to the tree. So, by the way, stop me if you have any questions at all. I know some of you have used Goldie May a lot, and some it's new to you. I thought I'd pull up an example that maybe even the people that have used Goldie May a ton may or may not know about or have seen this possible duplicate field that comes up. So I have a record that's come up here, and I recently reformatted this so it's slightly, I think, better. What it's showing here is that for Arthur Hutt, who is this father, the person of record, he has a son named, there's a duplicate for this Arthur Hutt, and it's this person here. And so if you see that, then you may want to switch over to the merge page for those two people and just run through and say, hey, is this is this really the same person we're describing here? And if so, I'm going to merge those two people before I continue with this record. But what I wanted to show you too is that sometimes in this yellow box you'll see a third level of indentation. So you'll see you see Arthur, and then what if you see a Helen down below? So that would mean that you're looking at a duplicate who has a daughter named Helen. And then as you compare that over to the family search window, you're seeing that we're about to add a new Helen to the tree when the duplicate also has a Helen daughter. So that's a really good time to stop, go resolve the duplicate, so we don't add a new Helen to the tree when this duplicate person already has a Helen in the family, if that makes sense. So that's one other reason I like to have Goldie May open there is that I can see the duplicates right away, and especially if there's a child among the duplicates that I would be adding, then I can go merge that duplicate before adding that to the tree. So if this is, I don't know, let me know if you have any other questions. I can go over this. I have videos on my YouTube channel about how to use volunteering. Joe Price has videos on his channel as well about how to use Goldie May with the various other tools, the map app, the spreadsheets, etc. So whatever is of interest to you, you can work on that area, that surname, that country, that city, that county, and hopefully these tools will help you go faster for the tedious parts, right? So you'll use your brain and your judgment to decide what matters, and you can think about the families. But then when it comes down to the clicking, we can hopefully move you faster, more quickly through that part. if I thought I would just show you one other part of Goldie May that is just sort of hidden in a way. It's a discovery experience in a way. And so it's called Find Women Ancestors in the 1900 and 1910 Censuses. And you can follow the prompts that it will give you. It says, open up your fan chart, and you can kind of recenter it on whoever you want. But what it'll do is show you these 3 women among all the people on my fan chart right now lived during the 1900 and 1910 censuses. And those censuses asked a really interesting question, which was, how many children have you had and how many of them are still alive? So you can walk people through this experience of saying, okay, let me choose one of them who would have been, old enough to have children by 1900. I'll look at Jeanette. And so it pops open Jeanette's window, and then it will say, it will detect if there are 1900 and 1910 census sources among her sources. And if so, it will give you these prompts. It will say, find out how many children she reported. So you'll click that link, and it will open the 1900 census now. And on the 1900 census, indexers did index those 2 questions. So you can just browse, you can just look over and see number of living children, 6, and how many children total, 6. So then Goldie May just prompts you to put those numbers into the 2 fields. So you hit save, and now it says, whoa, interesting. The tree shows her being the mother of 7 children with 6 children living. And so when the tree shows more children than a woman reported on the census, then there's a few possibilities. There may be an error in the tree, or maybe the census enumerator didn't talk to her. She talked to someone else at the door. So, if you go back and look at Jeanette Hazelton on the tree, you'll see those 7 children. And, you need to maybe see, is there a reason why she said 6, or we think she said 6, but the tree has 7? Is there somebody on that tree that doesn't fit? And then just to confirm your work, you could go back to her profile page and say, I want to look at the 1910 census now instead of the 1900. 10 years later, did she respond similarly or not? And this one was not indexed. Those 2 fields were not indexed by Family Search. So you need to look at the original. So then you'll go open up the original, and then it says zoom in the image and find Elvira Jeanette Hazelton. She'll be under her married name, and then look at columns 10 and 11. So you go into the, she's under Wilson as her married name. And then you scroll over to column 10 and 11. She says 7 and 6. So she's the mother of 7 children, 6 living. You say, great, the number of children reported on the census matches the number of children found in the tree. So there we have consensus. So why did she say, why was it 6 and 6 before? Was it someone else that answered for her and thought she had 6 children, but she knew, maybe she answered the 1910 census and she knew that she had 7, but one of them died at childbirth or something like that. So then you get to a little bit of a story for what might have happened. And so I like that as an experience of kind of thinking about the family. I've gone through and just written out on paper on a fan chart. I've looked for my ancestor women that lived during the 1900 and 1910 censuses and looked for discrepancies and what the census records say versus the tree. And I find that to be kind of a fun way to get a fresh look at a tree that, is pretty full by no work of my own. But because I can get a new experience with it by looking at it through this lens. So just wanted to show that to you too. I can pause there and see if there's any questions, and Joe, you could tell me if there's any questions, but that's all. Thanks so much for the time here tonight.
Thanks, Richard. And we'll do some Q&A in a bit. And I think one of my questions will be to have you show the subway map, because lots of people are curious about that. And I like that feature quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
And then with that, let's, Mindy, did you get it to work okay? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so just go ahead and unmute yourself and share your screen, but we're really excited. Perfect, that looks great. Yes, so go ahead. Yeah, we're excited to have Mindy Ricks from Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Hello. We're going to try this again. Thank you. I've been invited to share a website I created for a community reconstitution project that we did in our previous ward in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And if I got this right, last month, Cameron Briggs presented a impressive community reconstitution project that he's doing in Idaho. So this type of project is not new, and I'm not going to talk so much about what the project looked like. if you don't know, you can ask Joe or Cameron for more information, but I want to share the website, and more than just the website, I want to share with you principles of design thinking and universal design for learning that were the driving factors behind the website, because I think that way it can be much more applicable to the context that everybody is in doing and teaching family history. I learned about design when I was doing my master's in educational technology at the Michigan State University. I'm a recent graduate, and it was life-changing. I never considered myself to be a designer because I can only draw hearts and like 5-petal flowers. But when one of my courses exposed me to this idea of design, of purposefully creating things, I realized that it was something that I could apply to my work as a consultant. And I think it can be really helpful to all of us as we're trying to create experiences for others in family history, and as we're trying to solve problems in our family histories. So I've learned 2 lessons about design, and I kind of have one objective. I want to learn together with you about designing better family history experiences for others, using design thinking to solve our own family history problems, and learning a little bit about how we can design experiences that help people of all abilities, ages, and so forth to master family history. So first, I want to talk about what design thinking actually is, or what it means. There are a couple different ways that it can be visualized, but here's one from the Stanford B School. There's 5 steps: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. To explain what each of these mean, I want to tell you a bit of my story and how I use this design thinking to come to the website that I created. But before I do, I want you to think about, actually, let me step back a little bit. Design thinking is a problem-solving approach that has the intention to improve products or processes. So in one of my courses for the master's, I was asked to use this approach to solve a problem. I was a consultant at the time, and I wanted to solve the problem of not everyone in my ward actively receiving the blessings of family history all the time. So before I talk about each of these steps, I want you to think about a problem that you're facing in the realm of family history. And if you have a notebook, just jot it down. What is a problem that you have been working on or that you'd like to take on? As I tell you a little bit about each of these steps and my story, hopefully you'll be able to see how these ideas can apply to you solving your own problems that you're undertaking. So to begin with, empathize, that means to really come to understand what your users are feeling, thinking, and experiencing. So for example, I sent a survey just through Google Forms to about 10 members of my congregation, and I asked them open-ended questions about their past experiences with genealogy and their motivations and barriers to doing it. The most common motivation that they reported was wanting to connect with family. And the biggest barriers were time and the feeling that family history is daunting and difficult. No surprise there on both of those, right? As I looked at the things that they had sent back to me, I began to define my problem a little bit more specifically. Define then is really uncovering the roots of the problem, examining them more carefully, and really clearly defining the problem. In its most basic form, the problem that I was seeing was that my learners, or the people in my ward, were not doing the thing that they said they wanted to do. Family history, they wanted to do it, they understood the doctrine behind it, but they weren't doing it. So I brainstormed a list of reasons why people don't do something that they know is good for them. And I kind of grouped all of those things in that list and kind of came down to 2 big reasons, being denial and despair. First, I think people were denying that their contribution to the family tree was significant or could be significant. They also felt despair, fear, or stress when they tried to approach any sort of family history task. They didn't know how to begin. Existing resources were presenting too much information, and it was just overwhelming. So I redefined my question or the problem to, how can I help ward members, number one, believe their contribution is significant, and two, feel peace in the learning process as they're learning to do it. So I needed to find a way to help everyone feel like significant contributors, and I needed to find a way to provide extremely simplistic step-by-step instructions to minimize those feelings of despair. I needed to walk them along holding their hand. So those are the two first steps. Ideation is really fun because you get to go wide and think of as many possible solutions as you can, even crazy ones. I made a huge list over the course of 2 weeks. And thankfully, Roots Tech was at the same time that I was doing this ideation phase, and I came across Joe's video about the Community Reconstitution Project, and ding, 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 this is going to help people feel like significant contributors. So I also thought, well, maybe I can create a website to help them to provide that other portion where I'm holding their hands through this project. They're not going to feel any despair. They have their specific steps of what to do. So I made a prototype. I used a Google site to take my intangible ideas and make them tangible. I could share that website with others to ask for their feedback. So before I move on to the testing phase, the prototyping is just making something. I'm sure Golding May started out with some sort of prototype. We love Golding May, it's awesome. But it didn't get to where it is right off the bat, I imagine. You could correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so I sent out the website that I just kind of quickly threw up. I asked for feedback and I recorded the responses and iterated multiple times. And that's in the testing phase, asking for feedback and then responding to that feedback and trying to make it a little bit better. Now I'll admit that the website is still kind of in prototype phase. I know that it could be improved a lot more, but it came time to just make it go live and give it out to the ward. So we'll get to the website in a couple minutes, but I hope that as I've told this story, you've been able to see some steps that you can take as you're approaching the problems that you have come across in your own family history efforts. So this is kind of the first portion of design thinking. I want to talk a little bit now about the second thing that I learned, which is called the universal design for learning. The key assumption of universal design for learning is that learning is limited by environmental factors, not by something that is within the learners themselves. So if we can design a learning experience in a more intentional way that allows access to all users, whether they're children, adults, new converts, whatever it is, if we can think carefully about their learning environment, then everyone can become an expert learner. So I want to highlight just a few important elements of this type of design, instructional design, as they feature in the website that I developed, because there are tons of websites and resources about this. UDL is what it's called, and I can supply those later. But if we just make little tweaks, people can really learn family history a lot more quickly and a lot more easily without that feeling of despair. So for example, you can see the before and after here. The before is the spreadsheet we were using at first to help this is all we had at first, actually, for the project. And you can see that it's not very pleasant to look at. It's maybe a little bit hard to know, like, where do I look first? Down along the bottom, we had a lot of tabs that the members had to go to in order to progress through the project. But by making a couple tweaks, by adding color in the after, we could draw attention to where the people needed to look. Like, oh, this is where the instructions are. This is the column that I'm working in the green, or for example. And you can also see that we broke down the whole Community Reconstitution Project into 3 phases. Well, I shouldn't say the whole project because there's a lot more to it, but the parts that we are focusing on, we broke down into 3 phases. so that you could begin with just phase one. If you were a beginner person in Family Search, you could just do phase one, which is attaching the census to the new people, and you didn't have to go any further than that. Kids could do this. My 4-year-old could do phase one with a little bit of help, which was super fun. But if somebody wanted to go beyond just attaching the census, then they could learn how to do phase two and phase three. And in that way, we were scaffolding their learning. So if someone was happy with phase one, they didn't want to feel any more stress, they could just stick with that. And then I'll show you in the website too, how we kind of broke those up into different pages of the website. Actually, I'm going to take you to the site now, and you'll see some of those elements of scaffolding. The main page explained what the Census Project was, and the kind of the mission of the project. But what I really wanted to point out was the levels that we have up here at the top. So for level one, again, I'm not going to explain like how we separated each of the levels, but what I do want to point out was that we use visual and verbal cues to draw attention to things so that the people, again, weren't feeling despair. We use an overall video, which is pretty common in these types of things, to show the overall process, but then we also broke it down into one step at a time. So I really tried to focus on giving them very little text for instructions, numerating that text so they knew exactly which step they were on and which step to move to next. And then providing like extra information in a drop-down menu right here for the helpful hints for matching, for example. So you didn't have to take in that information all at once if you weren't ready for it yet. And then there you'll see I use the red boxes as a way to visually cue them, like these are the buttons you're looking for on the page. I think I've seen a lot of websites that are teaching family history that show like the whole screenshot, and that can be a little overwhelming. So I just also cut down the screenshot so that it's really just looking at what the users are needing to focus on. And then they get to choose when they're ready for the next phase or the next level by clicking on "I'm ready to level up," and then that would take them to the next screen. I also wanted to say, as part of the Universal Design for Learning, using multimodal communication is very important, because some people can learn from this website. Some people can learn better in a one-on-one situation. Some people learn better in like a large group. And we tried to do all of those things in the community reconstitution that we did in Ann Arbor. We met with the entire ward in the 5th Sunday meeting. We met with just the primary kids. We met with just seminary kids, so in smaller groups. We also did synchronous Zoom classes online, and we used the asynchronous website to provide instruction for anybody who couldn't make it to any of those groups. And I feel like this way we were really able to reach a wide variety of people, both in age and in like computer literacy. And it was a very successful project, I'd say. I think we connected 400 families to the tree. We never got to the point where we actually started incorporating yearbooks and pictures and things like that. But I can say that it really increased the spirituality in our ward over the year that we did it. And everybody learned how to at least attach a census record. They did something on the family tree, and they didn't feel so scared of it anymore. So I think I've kind of given you the whole visual of the website. If anyone's interested in the link to it, I'll put it in the chat. But other than that, I hope that you can take these principles of design and apply them to the problems that you are seeing in your own family history teaching and research. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mindy. That was fantastic. And so I have the participants up. So if you'd like to ask a question, then go ahead and raise your hand, and we can have you ask a question to any one of the presenters. I have a few, but let me Yeah, I'll start with my question, but feel free to raise your hand. Ron, the question I had for you was, what role did the teacher play and what role did the students play in making this work so well in terms of having so much student engagement?
Good question. Brother Mao is your average enthusiastic, energetic seminary teacher. And so he wasn't that, it wasn't that difficult for him to rally the students. But he used I'm not sure what he called it, but it was roughly a student council to organize and do the rallying of the classes. They ran with it themselves, and all he had to do was ask every day for them to go update the totals on the board.
And then related to that, who did the board? The board was beautiful. How did that come about? Was that kind of students thinking about drawing on the board, or because I'm always curious about how leaders and students interact with each other to bring about really neat things.
I never found out who designed that board.
Okay.
No clue.
Then for Richard, do you just want to show the subway map? I know it's probably the question when I'm showing people Goldie May, people are always curious what that thing is over on the right. I don't know if you want to show, if it's easy to show.
Yeah, for sure. Let me pull it up. Let's let this load one up here. Okay, yeah, so this is the subway map is this little drawing below that shows locations where the person lived on the left, and then the span of their lifetime along the bottom. And then the white dots are data points from the tree. So we're looking at the Thomas and Susan, so the main person and the spouse are listed as the blue and green lines respectively. And so if you hover over these points, you can see from the tree that all the data that's in the tree. These are the facts on the tree. And then you kind of see similar stuff for the wife. And then you can turn on hints, and then you'll see these gold dots appear where you can see, hey, there might be a 1930 census record that they're not in, or, you know, we're actually looking at the 1940 right now, or 1950 could be available too. So any of these hints that pop up, and look how it's showing the US Census records at the time when they were presumed to be living in the US, but then there was a time when they were living in British Columbia, Canada, and so it pops up the 1921 Canada Census, and then you can click on any of these links to open up that particular collection either on Family Search or Ancestry, and then you're looking for, you know, you're looking just inside of that one collection for Susan Ann Griffin. And so let me go back to where we were. So the hints are just meant to kind of fill in the dots of data you might be looking for. And then the other thing you want to just try is if you go to, you click on these details tabs, and you'll see these red dots appear, and the red dots represent the data that will be added to the tree if we decide to attach this 1940 census record to the tree. So then you get to kind of look at whether the data matches the tree, and you can see that the census says they were born in England, the tree says they were born in England as well, and then the 1940 census would put them in Yakima, Washington. And that is really consistent with the tree as well. So the red dots show that, yeah, this is a really good match. So yeah, the subway map's trying to help you really see the place as well. That's sometimes hard to do, for me at least, when I just browse the data. You know, if I kind of look at the data, it's hard to kind of realize what's going on. But the subway map's trying to tell you at a glance what's the story behind all the places they lived, and do they line up well. So you'll just see that as you're doing volunteering with Goldie May, you'll be able to see that subway map to help in your decision making.
Then Richard, Ron was asking, is there an upper limit to subway map levels?
No,
If you're talking about the places on the left, then no. If you can kind of switch to the city view, and then you'll really kind of, it gets busy, or you can kind of switch down to the state by state view. But yeah, if your person in the tree has lived in 20 places, you'll see those all crammed in there. It may not look very good, but you'll see them crammed in there.
I'm glad you asked that question. I did not know you could change the level of aggregation on that.
Oh yeah. So that comes in handy sometimes.
And then Mindy, a question I had for you was, I know you were doing your graduate degree in educational design or educational technology. Did you have any experience with websites before? Because your website's beautiful. So I'm trying to figure out like, what's the learning curve for a typical person to be able to create a beautiful website?
Oh, sure. I appreciate that. I think I had created maybe 1 or 2 beforehand. Google Sites makes it really easy to make it look pretty. But I would say the testing and the iteration is what made it come to what it looks like right now, because the first prototype was really bad. Yeah, I think anyone could do it though.
And then when you were prototyping it, were you ever there in person with the user? Like how did you kind of like gauge the user's experience as they were using your website? And
Yeah, I just remember showing it to Mike, my husband. I don't remember if I watched him using it or not, or if I just got his thoughts as I was using it. And then I sent the link to 5 women in the ward and just asked them a couple specific questions. And then they just reported back with text. I think it would have been really informative to watch someone go through it though.
well, are there other questions? Just at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button for reactions, and I think you can hit, there's a little, but if you hit reactions, you can hit raise hand, or if you want, you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. We have a few minutes for those that want to ask. We also, if there's anyone that would, so let me just, while you're thinking of any questions, I think I would love for you to ask any questions if you want. But the thing I do want to mention is we will be having the Bridge Forum all through 2023, and we're queuing up the different presenters. And we would love it if you have a desire to present a project you're working on, or if you see something that you really like, just let us know. The neat thing about this is that we had several people that couldn't be here today, and because we're able to record the presentations, basically like anyone's going to be able to learn design thinking from Mindy at any point in the future, or anyone's going to be able to go to Richard's videos and see how he did it, or everyone's going to be able to be inspired by what Ron did with youth. And so just know that the sections with the presentations will be available. With that, are there any other questions or comments? Or yeah, Cameron, go ahead.
Yeah, so for Mindy, on all of this design, because like I can do websites, but I'm not like the greatest like designer and thinking of all this. So you were saying that you had like an acronym, like U something UML, or I can't remember what you were saying, but where to go and find more principles behind this beyond just the basic graph that you had there of ideology and prototyping, etc.
Yeah, I was meaning to put a bunch of links in the end of my at the end of my slides, and I didn't get to it. I don't know if I can send out some resources through Joe.
Yeah,
or if
actually,
I should just
Mindy,
put it in the chat.
I think when we post your video, if there's other links you want us to provide, when we post the video, we could just say like, if you want to learn more about design thinking, these would be like, you know,
Okay.
a video or podcast or book that would be great to read.
Okay, does that work, Cameron? I've got probably
Yeah.
3 or 4 links that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and so following up with this, so this was your previous ward. Have you contemplated on things like, oh yeah, now that I'm progressing and using it more, I would probably change this or tweak it a little bit as time goes on. Anything that you would take from this Michigan census one specifically and change?
Are you asking how I would change it for the current ward I'm in, or just in the, like, if I were to go back to that ward? guess that's my-
Both questions, yes. So how would you adapt it to another ward really easily? And then of any other future lessons that you've learned that you would go, oh yeah, I wish I would have done this a little bit easier in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. One that I thought of actually as I was kind of revisiting the project, because it's been about a year since we worked on it, was I didn't provide enough feedback to the ward about like how much we'd progressed and how much there was still left to do. Because we finished all of the records or all of the census in our county. But I didn't really tell the ward that. And so I just I expanded it to all of the state, but nobody knew how well we were doing. And so I think it kind of petered off. So I would have provided more feedback to the ward. And it would be really easy to adapt to the ward that we're in now. I would just have to get new links from the linking lab, I think, for the state that we're in.
Gotcha. Because I'm like pretty much going to be copying a lot of these little things and implementing those in my own way with this.
Oh, good.
But yeah,
Feel free.
I love it.
Thank you. I'm going to be using your videos if I teach it to my new ward.
Yeah, Heather, go ahead.
So part of this, my question has already been answered a little bit by Mindy, but I was curious, what type of statistical information did you gather? I know it's a ward and this is more about the experience, but you said you kind of went from nobody knowing anything to, oh my goodness, the uptick and everything. Did you do any type of analysis or crunch any numbers on that?
I really tried to, but I wasn't like the ward family history leader. And I kept trying to get him to pull up the information about how many people have logged on to Family Search and like see the data. And it didn't work. So I never really saw the uptick. But I think I wrote down that we had about 45 members in the ward actively participating in the project, young and old. And then I do know that at least 5 members in the ward found ancestors who were living in Ann Arbor, and they got to do the work, temple work for them. So that was exciting.
Fabulous. And I know it's more about the experience than it is the numbers, but you still, when you go from one type of motive and communication to just redesigning a website and providing this and doing what you're doing, just really interesting to see just what that sparks in people. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Mindy and others, if you don't know, that family history activity report that's got all those nice numbers on them, that's available to almost any leader in a ward. Full presidencies, not just the bishopric or the temple and family history leader, but the bishopric's got it, to executive secretary, clerk, elders quorum presidency, primary presidency, and so forth. It's a very wide list. About the only ones that don't get it are us family history center directors.
Thank you. That's good to know.
So Ron, then here's a related question for you that Heather kind of brought up. I mean, it's always about the experience, but I don't know, with teenagers, you seem to point out that maybe the numbers might have been motivating in some way. So like, how would you address the person who's concerned about it being about the numbers? Like, I think your presentation had a nice blend of the impact on them as people, but also that it seemed like they were quite motivated by the numbers. How would you address the person that's like, oh, we shouldn't report the stats because then it'll just be focused on numbers?
They seem pretty motivated by the food too.
Oh, let's see, Ron, are you typing something? Or is your unmute? Oh, Ron, did you catch that question? Could you hear it okay? Oh, I just unmute yourself really quick if you're able to do that.
My mistake. I was typing an answer to it.
Oh yeah, sure.
Please ask it again.
Oh yeah, sorry. It was just, I think sometimes people are like, oh, we don't want to be so motivated by numbers. It should be about the experience. I think your presentation showed that you can have both. So I don't know, what would you say to the person that's like, oh, we shouldn't focus on the numbers so much? And so,
Well, the church does. I think I'm a numbers guy. I'm an accountant. And so I love numbers. And the reason I raised my hand on this just now is to ask you when the church is going to let me know the names of the unique submitters in my ward. because we ask them and then they say, forget it, they're not going to tell us. I think we can do both. I think it becomes a matter of what I think, Mindy, you may have said this, what appeals to each person. And with those kids, it was productivity in a short amount of time. They could do a lot in a little time. That's what happened with Brother Mao's class.
That's right. Well, thanks everyone for participating. I guess I just, again, encourage you, continue to come each month and let me know if you'd like to present. And also, if you don't want to use the full 10, 15 minutes, just let me know. We could have some short presentations, and I'm totally open to ideas. I guess what I love, what I've always loved about the Bridge Forum is that every time I come, I learn something new. And so, Mindy, I'm so grateful that you showed design thinking, because it actually, I'm now starting to think of my own family history projects and how I can do that. And then, Richard, I'm so glad you showed some of those new features in the subway map. I've been underutilizing that tool. I didn't realize just how many ways I could use it. And then, Ron, I'm so grateful you showed that picture of that whiteboard. I'm going to think of a way to get one of those in my house so my kids can draw cool pictures. And I don't know, I guess what I loved about the way you shared it was how it was meaningful to them. And Ron didn't include this in this presentation, so I was just going to end on this, that Ron, at the end of their year, that the students had a chance to kind of share their feelings about the seminary year, kind of like a seminary graduation kind of testimony opportunity. And he said to me that so many of them talked about the meaningful experiences they had while doing family history. And really that's what this is all about. It's just about helping people have meaningful experiences with family history so they can have that connection and that kindness and that sense of impact in their lives. And so again, thanks for everyone that participated tonight, and we'll see you guys all in January on the third Thursday.